This afternoon, my guest is Bill Knight, reporter extraordinaire for El Paso for how many years?
40 years here.
40 years. Wow. So in 40 years, what would you say the biggest change is for 40 years? 40 years to now.
No question. I guess it started with the transfer portal, and now with the money, and it's a whole new world now, really, and it's going to require some innovative thinking on Utep's part to stay afloat in that world.
Yeah. It's tough.
It is.
It's tough. And even just going up the street to New Mexico State, I mean, the basketball program's great up there, right?
Yeah,
they've been to the dance a couple years in a row.
And they were in a league that was not great, but it was decent. And, now just getting in the right league is hard. It is very hard.
What do you think about high school sports in El Paso? Did you cover them?
A little bit, not much. It was mostly always Utep. I mean, I covered Friday night football, and I grew up on that. I grew up in Dallas, and then I covered Temple High School in Central Texas, and they won a couple of 5A state championships.
Yeah.
High school football was huge there.
Yeah.
But it's good. There's a lot of good athletes, and unfortunately, people don't always get to see them because we're so isolated out here.
Yeah. How do you think the transfer portal and the NIL affects UTEP?
Well, I think it's going to depend on how UTEP reacts to it. The transfer portal is that's a tough one, and I don't think it's fair. I think players should at least have to sit out a year. If they want to transfer, they should, but if I were a parent, I'd tell my son to stick around a couple of years at least.
Yeah.
But as far as the NIL, El Paso supports UTEP like few cities do, and
right.
UTEP is the only game in town. And so if UTEP gets in the forefront of all that and takes advantage with businesses all over the place, they could they could put themselves ahead of the rest of the middle of the pack. They're not going to be up there with Alabama or Clemson, but they could be ahead of the New Mexico State, Colorado State, etc.
So I'm supposed to ask you about the 1940 men's basketball team.
I didn't play on that one.
No. You helped with Mr. Ramsey.
Yes.
And you wrote an article about them that got them some recognition.
Yeah, they did. Coach Haskins put basketball on the map here, but basketball has always been good, and it's always been popular here. And that was a conference championship team, played in old Holiday Hall there behind Kidd Field, and they said they used to have people hanging on the windows outside because the gym would be full.
Wow.
Watch them play.
Wow. See, I'm supposed to ask you about that. So then I got to ask you about the banner situation. What's the straight dope on the banner situation?
Some of the people in the administration, I guess, thought it would be a good idea to consolidate all
what do you
those
mean
banners.
Consolidate them?
Instead of having 1992 Sweet 16 or those kind of things, they would have just one banner for all their NCAA tournament appearances and have the years on the one banner, and they would have one banner for NITs and all the years instead.
Did they try that?
They did, yeah. They put it up for a little while, but Beto Fournier and with the silent backing of Coach Haskins, but a lot of the alumni got together, and as I told you earlier, I heard some of the players talking, when they put all the banners back, they said when it was just 2 or 3 banners, they said it didn't look as intimidating as it did before,
Yeah.
It is impressive,
Yeah. You're relatively close to the Haskins, huh?
A big part.
You're relatively close to Haskins.
Yeah. We got to be good friends from early on when I got here, I was covering first thing I covered was the Diablos in the summer, but Utep football and
Diablos used to be something, man.
they were, Jim Paul he was a magician.
Ahead of his time.
He was way ahead of his time.
Yeah.
He was so good.
But when we were AA Arizona,
Mm-hmm.
Randy Johnson pitched here, and tons of people came through here.
Right. Oh yeah. I remember interviewing Darryl Strawberry.
Yeah,
And,
he was here.
he played for the Jackson Nats, and actually Billy Bean, who's famous for the Moneyball, he was in the same outfield, and he was also a #1 draft choice.
Yeah.
He and Strawberry both were. I remember doing stories on both those guys. And, but anyway, going back to Coach Haskins, I started, the school year in September covering Utep football, and Coach was a big football fan.
Yeah, he was.
So he came over, and he was friends with Bill Michael, who was the head coach at the time, and introduced himself to me and took me for my first ride in the truck,
We're going to talk about that in a minute.
Going about 15 or 20 miles an hour. But I still remember one of the first things he said to me, he goes, "Now, come on, tell me the truth." He goes, "You like football better than you do basketball, don't you?" And I said, "No, not really, because I like them both a lot." He goes, "Well, I sure as hell do." Which was not true, but he loved football. But I mean, he loved basketball so much that when he was retired, he would have A&M basketball on the radio, listen to Billy Gillespie's team, Nebraska's basketball on the radio, listen to Doc's team, and he'd have Utep, and if one was on TV. But he'd have 3 games going at the same time.
I wish Gillespie hadn't gone to Kentucky.
Yeah, I know. I understand why he did, but it was a mistake.
You mean it's Kentucky, that's why he
Right,
did it?
yeah. But, he would be a Texas legend now if he'd stayed at Texas A&M.
He would have been.
Yeah.
He would have been.
Yeah, I mean, he turned that around. They were 0-16 in conference play the year before he got there.
Yep. He turned them around.
He did. He got a raise before the first year was up after he beat Texas there in college.
Beto tells me that Coach was all excited about UT coming here to play football.
Oh.
When he died.
Yeah.
Like the day before he died or something.
Yeah.
He was all excited about it.
He was, yeah. He really enjoyed his football, and after he retired, we talked every Sunday morning. He'd call and we'd talk about an hour and talk about football or basketball or baseball or whatever. But we always.
You ever heard the story about his brother striking out Mickey Mantle twice?
No, I didn't hear that one.
Yeah, Beto told me that one the other day.
Yeah, Coach was quite a pitcher himself.
Really?
Yeah, he played semi-pro baseball, and of course he was a scratch golfer, and but I guess back in the day I went to they used to have WAC meetings and would meet with the staffs of all the football teams, and I was at Utah one time in Salt Lake City, and the defensive back coach at Utah told me, he said, when you get back, tell Don Haskins I said hello. He said, when I was a kid in Oklahoma, I used to hitchhike to go watch him shoot pool.
He was a pool star.
Oh, it was, yeah.
And he sandbagged, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. He took some people's money here and there.
So were you around Rosas with him?
Yeah, everywhere. And
so how does that start? How does Coach Haskins? How does the first day in the truck happen?
Like I said, he came to the football office and met me and just said, "Come on, let's go for a ride." And we took a lot of rides over the years. And one of the funnier ones was, after he'd had his heart attacks and stuff, he was supposed to exercise.
Yeah.
And Coach never did, but he said one time we were riding in the truck, and he said, "Let's go out on the west side. There's like these grass farms." And he said, "I like walking there because it's easier on my legs." And I said, "Okay." So we get out there, and he's got me, puts me behind the wheel, and he starts walking. He said, "I'll just wave when I get tired. You follow along behind and you pick me up." And so I said, "Okay." He walked maybe 100 yards and he waved. I picked him up. And that was his exercise for the day.
Fred Reynolds told me the other day that when he was a Texas trooper, state trooper,
Uh-huh.
he said he had somebody pulled over about 15 miles outside of East El Paso. And he says a truck pulls up and a hand comes out. And he takes Fred back and he goes, "Why do you have that guy in handcuffs?" You know? And Coach says, "I think I know him. Can I see him?" And Fred went up and got him and took him back to Coach. Coach said, "I don't know him."
Fred got me a couple of times when he was a trooper. He'd recognize my car and he'd turn the lights on and I'd pull over and he'd just smile and wave and go on by.
Yeah. Fred was a good guy.
The best.
Yeah, he's a
really
good he's
guy.
a good one.
He was an outstanding player here. And
So you go from that first driving the truck to then having Thanksgiving dinners at Haskins' house.
yeah, I did. And Christmas dinner a couple of times. I was divorced and Coach and Mary had me over, you know, and they have Steve and Brent and their families were there. And it's funny, one time Coach always he was playing, but he'd gripe, you know, with Mary. He goes, "When are we gonna eat?" You know, and you know, it was Thanksgiving dinner, so it'd be later in the afternoon, and they'd be fixing everything. And one time he was sitting, and I was sitting next to him, and he was sitting there, and Mary came by, and he goes, "We're gonna eat," you know. I said, he goes, "Well, I'm the head coach in this house," and Mary just smiles down at him and goes, "You just think you are, mister."
That's great.
He told a great story on himself. But he said when Moose Dubing, you know, it was
Baseball.
Moose. It was a long time referee too. After that, or during his while he was with the Angels, and but he wouldn't call Utep games because he was friends with Coach. But he would come in for the Sun Bowl tournament and call the other game. So after the game, he said he and Moots and a couple other guys went to Juarez and, you know, had a few root beers or whatever. And
I heard it referred to as Mexican coffee.
yeah. And he said, so, you know, we were out and they were out all night. He said he got home and he said, "I just eased into bed when I heard Mary's alarm go off." And he said, you know, she gets up and in a minute she comes back and she wakes him up, you know. She goes, "Tom, what time did you get in last night?" And he said, "I think she always went to bed about 10, you know." And he said, "Oh, around midnight." And she said, "In that case, our paper boy ought to be playing for the New York Yankees because he threw our paper under your tire." He'd pulled in, parked on top of the newspaper, and busted it himself.
That's great. So you remember when Beto ended up with Coach?
Yeah.
That's a strange relationship.
It is, isn't
Yeah.
it?
I mean, every day.
Yeah.
You know what Beto says.
Yeah, he took good care of Coach.
Yeah.
He watched over him. It's a shame. Coach hated being in a wheelchair, you know, and he just couldn't get around as much. And he went to a basketball clinic in Dallas, you know, with a lot of big names and stuff. Had a great time, but he wouldn't do it again because he had to be in a wheelchair, go through the airport and all that. But he really enjoyed the basketball part of it, you know.
Yeah. So why don't we have a baseball team?
Money. You know.
Really?
I mean, yeah. You know, I mean, you can't blame Title IX because it's a good thing. You know, women have a right to play, but there, you know, if they added baseball back, they'd have to add. You know, I think they're probably behind on women's sports as it is. You know, as far as the number of athletes, and you know, when I covered the baseball team in the early '80s, you know, and they had some pretty good teams, but nobody ever went, you know. I mean, there was no attendance at all. And sometimes they'd play at Dudley Field, and it was the strangest thing because they would play at like 8 o'clock in the morning because the Diablos would be playing that night, but they would let them use the field. But you'd hear those motorized cleaners and stuff while they were playing the game, going in the background.
Yeah.
Made for a bizarre atmosphere, but it's a shame because there's so many good baseball players in this city.
Yeah, there are. I mean, you can go out to San Elizario and put together 9 kids that can beat anybody.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah, they can. And I've always said, I think that, and it's probably better education-wise that they have so many schools here, but in the interior of the state, they were a little more hesitant to divide up schools. And here we've got so many schools that, let's say, Coronado and Franklin were one school, or Eastwood and Hanks.
In 1976, when we won state, the only reason we won is because we all went to Eastwood. If we had to do it again, 2 would go to Hanks, 2 would go to Americas,
Exactly.
2 would go to Montwood,
Yeah.
1 to Eastwood. And that whole thing is going to prevent El Paso from ever getting there again.
Yeah. Plano, which is a suburb of Dallas, basically, they were good in football for years and years, and they actually divided their campus so they could keep one school for a long time, and they'd have freshmen and sophomores would go one place, junior and seniors, and junior and seniors would go to 2 different places, but they all went to Plano High School, and played
Yeah.
for the Plano Wildcats.
Yeah. But we wouldn't win in today's environment.
Yeah, it's tough, and it's like I said, there are so many good athletes, and they go
and every now and then somebody just comes out of the pack like Aaron Jones.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you didn't imagine him doing what he's doing.
No.
No way.
I in fairness, I did when he was almost through with his sophomore year. I wrote a column off
before he got hurt?
games. Yeah, before he had the ankle injury. And, ankle injuries, they happen to running backs.
Sure.
I mean, I've got chronic tendonitis in mine. But I wrote a column saying, this is not a prediction, but Aaron Jones is a prototypical size for an NFL running back. And I said, now listen, the top 10 NFL rushers of all time, only 2 of them are over 6 feet tall. Eric Dickerson and Jim Brown, but everybody else is like 5'8", 5'9" to 5'11", and I said, he don't discount him because he's 5'9", which is what happened with a lot of schools that didn't recruit him because of that, and you see that in football. I mean, how many schools probably didn't recruit Mike Singletary, and except for Baylor because he was 5'11" or whatever. The list goes on. I think Jerry Rice drops forever in the draft because he ran a 4.6 40 or something.
Look at Tom Brady.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. But in the end, it turns out it's a game, and despite size, weight, whatever, some kids can play it and some can't. And they might, the old saying, looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane, but some of them look like Jane and play like Tarzan.
Yeah. And then his other brother's playing his brother's playing in the Canadian League, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Alvin.
Was Alvin just as good in college?
No, but he was good.
Yeah.
He was good, yeah. Aaron was exceptional, and he kind of, you saw when he left, he kind of lifted that program, he gave them a spark, and that they couldn't match, and it hadn't been the same since he left. And like I said, if he had been 6'2" instead of 5'9", he'd probably been playing for Alabama or somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, Alabama. So were you in favor of the stadium, the tearing down the buildings and building the stadium where we did it? Or did you think maybe they could go out and redo Dudley Field? Or whatever it was called, Cohen Field?
Oh, no, I liked it downtown. I thought it was a nice setting. I think it's pumped up downtown a little bit, there's
it's happening.
more activity. And, my only concern early was was traffic and parking, and it turned out to be a non-issue completely.
Yeah.
And I never heard anybody complaining about problems getting in or out or parking, and such a beautiful stadium. And I just think it's, I mean, obviously my whole life I've been probably like you, born and raised a sports guy, so I was happy with that. And at the time, the El Paso Times we'd sold our building to City Hall when all that, and we were right down the street at the bottom of the hill there, across from that parking lot, and so we could walk to the games. It was
day games were
place
great
for us. Oh yeah. But I grew up with baseball. I loved football, basketball, and baseball. Baseball was my dad's favorite sport, and because he was older and it was the only sport back then.
Right.
And, I loved having it. And, as a kid, I said in the summer, those were my bedtime stories. I fell asleep listening to baseball games.
Sure. So somebody told me recently that the 1964 basketball team is the best basketball team to ever take the court.
The one with Jim Barnes and that group, they were really good. I guess they went 25-3, and only 3 games they lost, Jim Barnes fouled out of. And
Right.
Coach Haskins always said that he didn't realize how close that team was to winning the national championship until the '66 team won, and then he looked back at that one and he said, that team was good enough too,
Yeah.
He felt like.
Nolan was on that team, right?
No, he had just finished.
Oh, he was done.
He was done, yeah. He joined. Bobby Divler was the point guard on that team,
Yeah.
with long-time official.
Yeah.
And
Where was Bob Leslie?
let's see, he might have been on that team. Coach said he was a tremendous shooter,
Unbelievable.
great shooter.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And
He'd play with us in the summer and just,
is that right?
yeah, him and Cager.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chris told a great story about Nate Archibald. He said Nate had finished his senior season, and an NBA scout came through, and he was talking to Coach, and he said, well, he's a good little guard, but who in the NBA can he guard? And Coach said, he looked at him and he said, who have you got in the NBA that can guard him?
Yeah.
Which turned out to be, I mean, that season in 70, 71, 70, he's still the only guy in NBA history to lead the league in scoring and assists in the same year.
Yep.
And Coach said he told him he was going to do it before, but I mean, that was before the three-point shot, and he was averaging over 30 points a game.
Do you know what Nate's doing?
He was up in New York. I think he's retired, but he was having some heart problems.
I heard he had a heart transplant.
Yeah, he had some serious heart issues, and he'd gotten his master's and put in some work towards a PhD, I think. But
Really?
he was working with kids and stuff, and then had the heart issues.
So how can UTEP get the community support? Yeah, is the answer winning?
Yeah, it is, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, you could reach out and reach out and reach out, but if they don't win and get people excited, I mean, and we've all seen what happens when they do. When Mike Price was here and Gary Nord's last year or two, when they put 50,000 in the Sun Bowl. I mean, it was nothing for them to do that when they were winning games, and you don't have to be in the top 10 or top 25 just win, yeah. And Bob Stoll came in 88, did that, and had a couple winning seasons, and had the 10-win season.
Yeah, and those are 10 real wins.
Yeah, they were. I mean, they were in the WAC then with BYU and Utah, and a lot of good competition. And
Yeah.
It was fun to watch. And
Give me
got
three.
excited.
Give me 3 of your best Coach Haskins stories.
3 of his Coach Haskins.
And Wetzel gave them to us the other night. So
Did he really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure Dan had some. And
he's been in the truck.
Dan said I think he's written before that he thought Coach Haskins was maybe the best coach of all time, you know, because maybe Mike Krzyzewski or Roy Williamson couldn't do at Utep what they did where they were, and there might be some truth to that.
Dan said he had to write Coach's autobiography, and Coach told him, "You're not allowed to use the word I." And Dan's like, how the hell am I supposed to write an autobiography without the word I?
I'll never forget, and I don't know if I would put this in my top 3, but it was a very touching morning when Bobby Joe Hill passed away, and Coach called, and we talked for an hour and a half or 2, you know, and he was telling stories. And after we hung up, Mary called back a little bit later and said, "Bill, Utep wants a statement from Don, and, you know, could you do something?" And of course, we just talked about it for an hour and a half, so I wrote something up, and they sent it to Utep, and Utep sent out the release. So I think I was quoting myself that day.
Bobby Joe hurt, didn't it?
It did. It did. It was like a son.
Yeah.
And,
I guess Latin told me the other day that Bobby Joe was the best player in the country of the '66 year.
I tell you what, Coach always said that the other players believed Bobby Joe could do anything. They said they believed that he could whip Muhammad Ali if he wanted to, and Bobby Joe would get them fired up, you know. And I guess they played at New Mexico one time, and New Mexico had a good big man, and he scored a couple of times on David. And Bobby Joe pulled David aside as they were going to a timeout and said, "You can't stop him, I'll guard him." You know, "You take my man," or something. Got David fired up. I don't think the guy scored again, but he was really good. And he, you know, I think the story goes that Bobby Joe always laughed about it, you know, but when he made those 3 steals against Kentucky, and Kentucky had an All-American backcourt with Pat Riley and Louis Dampier, who played in the
Great
ABA.
backcourt.
Yes, and you know, he's thought of it. They go to a timeout, and Bobby Joe goes, "I can get it anytime you want it, Coach." He was an amazing athlete, an amazing personality to go with it. You know, he's just a natural leader, and he'd come into practice and he'd give Coach a hard time because back when they played, you know, they didn't get water or anything, and he'd go over to they'd have water and Gatorade buckets, and he'd even turn the spigot and let it drip on the floor to make sure it was really there, and shake his head and say, "You're getting soft, Coach."
So that's for those 3 stories.
Oh yes, 3 stories. Well, let's see. Once, I probably shouldn't admit this, or maybe I should admit it. I've never been much of a drinker, you know, but Coach could put it away. And I would go out with him on the road just to listen to his stories, you know, and I might nurse a beer or drink water or whatever. And so we were in San Diego one time, and he said, you know, we were at the hotel bar and sitting around. Coach was telling us his stories, and the bar closed, and we go up to our hotel room, you know, and I kind of fell in bed, and we happened to have those rooms where the doors adjoin, and he was in the one next to me, and all of a sudden there was this banging on the door. "Bell, Bell." I said, "Why, Coach?" I opened the door. He goes, "Get in here and help me eat this chicken." And he had like 4 bags of fried chicken on the bed all over the place. One time, Coach was impossible to get before the era of the cell phone. If you didn't get him when he left practice, forget it. You know, sometimes I'd call Mary just for the heck of it, and she'd go, "Nah, Bill, you know, I don't know where he is." And so it was during the semester break, you know, and they were having graduation in the Special Events Center, and So I was trying to find out, and they were also using Memorial Gym as kind of a prep place, and so I was trying to get Coach to find out where they were going to practice the next day, because I always went to practice. And I said, and I left a message with Mary, and finally he calls about 10:30 or 11, and he just goes, "Lemo." And I said, "What?" He goes, "Lemo." And I said, "What are you talking about, Coach?" And he laughed. He goes, "Pardon me, I had a little bit to drink. Practiced at the Lee Moore home." And I said, "I thought you were supposed to cut that out, Coach." And he goes, "I am, but bleep it." I told his players, and he probably would have been irritated to know that I did, that I said, "You guys will not know how funny this man is until you graduate, and then you'll see it. He won't let you see it." But one of my favorite things he would do at practice, guys could not talk at practice. They supposed to just keep their mouth shut and do whatever, and so I'd do it with Steve Yellen, and he did it with everybody. But he'd challenge them sometimes. So you just gonna let them drive the baseline like that or whatever? Of course they wouldn't say anything, and he'd go, "Are ya? Are ya?" like that. And so he'd go, "Well," he goes, "Oh, shut up." As soon as they opened their mouth, But I always said he was like this amazing point guard at practice, because I grew up with basketball and played a lot, and I think I could recognize certain things out there, but Coach saw it instantly. It's like 10 players on the floor, somebody was out of place, he saw it immediately, and would correct it. And
Well, were you around here when he made the decision to go to the University of Detroit?
I was, and that's before I got here. He
for one day.
Told me, he told me that. He said that they took him in and showed him his office, and it was this huge office, and had a wet bar and all this stuff. And he said we were walking down the way, and they had reassigned the former head coach, and he had a little office like a closet, and Coach said, "I got to thinking, if I didn't win enough games, that could be me in that closet." So he said he flew back. I think he said he was in Dallas, and he called Jim Bowden, and
Big Jim.
Yeah, the athletic director, and see if he kept his job back. And of course, that was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But
that was really the only time he left.
Yeah, he had a lot of people over the years trying to get him.
I bet so.
Including a lot of the ABA teams and NBA teams, and Coach was smart enough to know where he felt comfortable, and he earlier we were talking about the crowds at the University of Wyoming were great. It was a bunch of drunk cowboys is what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And they would pack it, and they played until they built their new place, but for several years we went up there, they were playing in an old rodeo arena, and they have boards down because there's dirt, and you'd have to keep wet towels to keep your shoes clean once you got to the court. But they would open the doors to the students, and it was just, you have student seating first come. So they'd run, and the students would dive and lay out on there to save seats for their friends and stuff, and they would just, Utep would come in street clothes, and they'd get harassed. And Coach would be wearing his flannel shirt and his jacket and his jeans and boots, and he would change, and go put his coat and tie on before the game, but he had all that on. He went and sat right in the middle of the students and talked to them and had a good time. And they loved him. They harassed him, during the game, but they all loved him up there.
Yeah. You miss him?
Oh yeah, all the time. And I lived most of my years here on the west side, but I live on the east side now, and I go by Don Haskins Avenue almost every day, and think about it and all the conversations. I said, Coach, you know, you go in that truck and drive 15, 20 miles an hour, and you have these great conversations, you know. And I remember, and this would definitely be one of my favorite stories. It's not really funny, but he and some buddies were hunting one time, and they drove their trucks through I guess the Rio Grande was a creek at some point, and they drove it across, and they discovered this little tiny Mexican village, and he said it was just backwards, you know, from another era or something. And he said they decided he'd fill up his back of his truck with toys and coats and blankets and stuff, and take it every Christmas out there. And I remember one time I said, boy, that must have made those people feel good, Coach. And he said, not as good as it made me feel.
Yeah.
You know, and it was.
Beto said they tried to put something together with blankets.
Mm-hmm.
Like they want to do a blanket thing every year or something.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I just never got
That'd be
never
great.
got it done.
Yeah.
You're talking about NBA, ABA. What do you think about the NBA game today? Can you watch it?
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, I think as an old point guard, you love it as far as the long distance shooting, and maybe not quite so much dunking. And but man, as it changed and opened up, I said, as a 6 foot guard, I said, you know, I played at a small college, and I said, you know, even there, you could beat your guy driving in the middle of the lane, and you know, some guy 6'10's just, I mean, what are you gonna do? Now, you beat your guy driving in the middle of the lane, you got guys on each wing ready for a pass, you know, something you can do with it. And
there's no inside game anymore, huh?
there is not. I never thought I would see the day, you know, because I mean, you just didn't feel like you could win without the inside game. And, you know, Coach knew that when he was recruiting. I always said it was a shame that Coach didn't enjoy travel and he didn't enjoy recruiting, but he was so good at it. I mean, he recruited that national championship team.
Yeah.
That was him, you know. And I said, who knows? I mean, as good as they were all those years, who knows how good they could have been if he, because Tim would deny it, but I think Tim Floyd really enjoyed recruiting, you know, and Tim was good at it too. And but Coach didn't, and Tim always said, he said, I had to bring Coach on later visits. I couldn't take him on a first visit because our whole selling point was Coach Haskins, you know, and Utep, but Coach was our selling point. And he said, one time I took Coach with me on the first visit, and I started my spiel, you know, telling him, and Coach said, oh, they don't want to hear about that, you know. He just cut him off, and he said, so I just started reading him later, you know, after he sold him with Coach Haskins.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, Bill, I want to thank you for stopping by.
Thank you. Enjoyed
We
it.
could probably talk for another 2 hours.
Sure.
Well, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Doug.
you.